There's a few reasons why this conversation is fun for me. Like one is you presented at the Cambridge event in SF. I think your presentation was very well received. I found especially the archery piece of your background pretty interesting. And then you also come from, I would say from an educational standpoint, you were like very fortunate in terms of like where you were able to go to attend college at MIT and like your career prospects. The fact that you chose like an entrepreneurial path was quite interesting.
Yeah, which I never dreamed of doing. And I think another fun fact that I'll share is I also grew up not in Seoul, but the rural side of Korea.
Oh.
So I grew up picking corn off the ground on my way to school. So we can also talk about that too.
Let's jump into it. So professionally, can you share a little bit about like what you're doing right now?
Yeah.
I'll ask you some more detailed questions later in the conversation. But professionally, what you're doing, and then also a little bit about your upbringing and your like move to the States.
Yeah, so right now I'm founder CEO of Miracle. We've been helping biotech companies speed up clinical trials, and we do that by helping integrate all of their different clinical trial systems into a single automated dashboard, replacing all the manual Excel spreadsheet work that they've been doing. I've been doing this for about 2.5 years, and I'm doing it in San Francisco right now. But before that, I spent some time in Boston, which is where I went to undergrad, worked in sales, in health tech, product manager, and then went back to grad school before coming out to San Francisco.
And when was it that you first moved to the States? Was it for school, for college?
So when I first emigrated, it was with my family for my parents' work. This was back in 2003 when I was second grade. So I moved pretty early on.
Okay. Gotcha. And then your life in Korea and a little bit about the immigration story and that experience. Can you share a little bit more there?
Yeah, so I grew up on the rural side of Korea, and down near Jinju and Sacheon, which is where the Air Force base, one of the Air Force bases in Korea. My dad wasn't in the Air Force, but he worked very closely in the aerospace industry. So I grew up every weekend looking at fighter jets, military tanks. It was a rural area where there was a heavy military presence, and that's, I think, ultimately how I got very interested in those kind of fighter jets and machines and engineering. That's all I saw every single weekend. But also at the same time, I know most Koreans that you typically run into come from Seoul. But I didn't come to Seoul until I became an adult.
Wow.
So some of the vivid memories I have of going to school in Korea, of course, this is in my early elementary and kindergarten days, is on the way to school, there's farms, there's cornfields. I would pluck a couple and be yanked by the ear by the farm owner. And so that's kind of like the childhood that I've had until my dad had the opportunity to work in the States for a few years. And that was when I left that place that I've known as home and just entered a whole new world where there's no more farms and no more rural stuff. And of course, there's apartments people live in, and then once we came to the States, I was just surprised at how many cars there were, and how everything was so much more urban. And we moved to close to the LA area.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you spent most of your childhood in the States in California then?
Yeah. From second grade onwards until I went to college, it was all in Orange County in California.
Okay. And you were pretty, like, when you and your parents immigrated, do you have any siblings, by the way?
I have a younger brother.
Brother?
We all went together back in 2003.
And was that, you guys were pretty immersed in like the Korean American community then in LA? Or
yeah, I think even actually when I first came to the States, there weren't that many Koreans. I think the elementary school that I went to had like 2 or 3 other Koreans in total. It's very different now because I think by the time I graduated high school, by high school in a class of like 30 or 40, 10 or 13 would be Koreans. But when I first came to the States, it was in a class of like 30.
Wow.
I was the only Korean, if not maybe 1 or 2 in the whole entire grade.
And I know you're here in Seoul now, in part to see family. It turned into a little bit of business as well.
Yeah.
But your family, like extended family, most of them are still in.
Yeah,
they're
all in Korea.
Okay.
They're all in Korea, spread apart in Korea. Yeah.
Wow. And how much of your like childhood memories, like when you first moved to the U.S., what that experience was like, do you remember?
Moving to the States, I still remember going to school not knowing how to speak English. I remember as soon as we were going to immigrate to, or at the time, go to the States for my dad's work for a few years. I did some last minute like Hagwon for like English and try to pick up on the language. But when I actually first came here, I remember going to class and not understanding anything. I'm just smiling, just sitting there. But I had a really good ESL tutor at school, so I think it took about a good year for me to pick up on the language. But it was pretty cool because back in Korea in elementary school, I was the troublemaker. I was
really
running around and picking fights.
Wow.
And, super outgoing. But I think as soon as I came here, anything I try to say or want to say, I can't because I don't know the language. And I think that's kind of where I might have had a bit of a shift in personality, at least as a child, to become a little less outgoing than I used to be as a little kid in Korea.
Wow. And when you come back to Korea regularly to see family, in terms of like how you feel and what your experience is like do you enjoy being back in Korea? Do you much prefer just like being in the States and staying there? What is your overall like sentiment now?
I actually really do like coming back. A large part definitely is because I have family here.
Yeah.
But I also really do enjoy the Korean culture, and I really do like having, I have a lot of friends here now too. So being able to come back and take part in the Korean culture, especially if you see on my face, I got a little bit of a skincare in Korea too. Yeah. So, I really enjoy that. And I think, I think some say that I've gone to Korea at such a young age. And some say that, maybe he's a lot more American. I probably look quite American, but I really see myself as a hybrid where I've come to really enjoy the best of both worlds. And I think as much as I see myself enjoying it in the States, I really enjoy coming back to Korea from time to time.
Growing up in the States, like you had mentioned in terms of your maybe personality, language has a huge piece of it in terms of how you're able to express yourself. But in terms of your like extroverted, let's say troublemaker type of personality when you're in Korea, like early youth, and then versus America, like growing up socialization wise, your friend group, was it largely Korean heritage background? Was it like Hispanic, white, black, just quite diverse? How would you describe like through middle school, through high school, in terms of the social groups that you interacted with? What was that like?
I think in elementary school, I remember it being mostly white. I don't think I had that many Asian friends up until like 6th grade, which is when I've all of a sudden started noticing there's so many Asians coming to this elementary school. And then from middle school and high school, I did really enjoy math and science, so I tried to go to those middle schools and high schools in the area where I heard like there's good science and those kind of math programs. And as soon as I went to those kind of middle schools that you have to test into, everyone was Asian. Same thing with high school.
The academic rigor and like your competency in the math and sciences, how much of that was just your own curiosity and like natural proclivity towards those subjects versus many people with like Korean heritage background, obviously their parents push them and put them in programs where they can excel in those fields. To what degree was it just individualistic versus also your parents like encouraging you to do that?
I think this part actually, so going back, so even growing up, so I should say I first came to the States in 2nd grade. I came back to Korea for 5th grade as my dad's work assignment wrapped up. And then we went back to the States in 6th grade. And I think that's kind of where I really realized what kind of a learner I am. Because I think when we're in Korea, the Hagwon system and like everyone's like pushing hard and you see like all the test scores and you got to beat the other kid. I still remember that being a thing, even though my parents weren't super hard on me, but it does get to you. But whenever I was in the States, I was the best kid at math or science, right? And like while Korea is doing like algebra, everyone in the States was still doing like addition and multiplication. So I felt less of a pressure in the States to study. And I guess, you could say I was kind of a 청개구리, because when people say like, oh, Jin, you should study, I didn't like that. But when people didn't tell me to study, I'm like, maybe I should. So I think that's kind of what got me to be more naturally curious. And so when my family came back to the States for my 6th grade, mostly because I enjoyed the American education system, no one was telling me to study like they did when I was in 5th grade in Korea, right? Everyone was trying to learn like the middle school stuff and the high school stuff as 5th fifth grade. But in America, people were just doing multiplication and maybe doing some division, and like no one was pushing me to do that. But I still remember after coming back home from school, even as an elementary kid, I was just bored with the stuff that they're teaching us at school. So I think that's kind of where I started going on the internet and just trying to look for like harder math questions, and that's ultimately how I trembled upon different kind of math competitions. And that's when I kind of learned that, oh, there's a regular junior high, or there's also like science and math middle schools that you can test into, and that's where people come to do math competitions. And I think that's really kind of what got me going, is no one telling me to study. Interestingly, kind of got me to kind of push myself and just see like, oh, what else is out there? What can I do?
Yep. I'll ask you more about kind of academic background, your experience at MIT. The other piece of your story that was really interesting when you presented in San Francisco was the whole like archery background. When I was in New York, there was a girl who presented. Her name was Christy An, and she was an ex-tennis professional. She was a professional player for, I think, like 5 or 6 years. And then like in the audience, we also had Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu professional, like martial arts player. And he did BJJ for like 7 or 8 years. Also Korean heritage background. I'm very interested in maybe getting a group of people where like sports and fitness, that's like background, they were really passionate about it, because I don't see that many of those communities specifically for like Korean heritage backgrounds, even though there are a handful of them. Like archery, that's how you got into it, how you did quite well. I mean, I think it was the U.S. national team or something
US
like
national
that.
Team.
Can you explain some of that background as well?
Yeah, so I loved playing sports growing up. So, you know, during spring, I would do soccer, and then swimming over the summer, basketball in the fall, and water polo here and there. And I think as I went to middle school, this was right around 2010, 2011, right before the London Olympics. The U.S. Olympic head coach for archery was Korean at the time, and he was doing some community archery demonstration. And I just happened to go to that and just see what archery is like, because having really enjoyed sports, that was something I just wanted to try. And once I went there, there was a chance to shoot a few arrows. And I did see that from all the kids that have just shot arrows, I was like, mine are a lot more clustered together. And while I was thinking that's pretty interesting, there was an old man who came and asked where my parents are, and that was the U.S. Olympic head coach. Who, you know, kind of suggested like, hey, maybe archery's worth trying. And that's ultimately how I started. That's ultimately how I started off with a bow and arrow. And I think that, I don't know if it was natural talent, but in the first 3 months of doing archery, I did go to a California state tournament, and I think I ranked in the top 5. So that's kind of where I realized, oh, I'm pretty good at this. And where I kept going. And it did take me 3 years to make the national team. But what I really liked about archery is I got to enjoy it, but because my younger brother also tagged around while I was doing archery, my parents didn't want to leave him at home. He used to just sit in the car and just chill in the back while I did it. And one of the days, my archery coach told my brother, Kevin, hey, you should shoot too. And he ended up making the national team in 6 months. While it took me 3 years. But I think overall, archery played a huge part in my upbringing, because it really turned it into a family sport. And I think before, while my brother and I had different interests, you know, my parents were running off on different things to try to help my brother on sports and stuff that he likes and what I like. But now having archery bring the family together, you know, my dad turned into an archery coach. My mom also, you know, helped us, you know, as an archery coach as well. And, you know, even right now, our home garage is filled with all kinds of archery equipment. So, you know, it was really fun. And I think archery was a very unique sport that I never thought I would find it that much fun. But I think one of the things that I like most about it is, you know, training at the Olympic Training Center down in Chula Vista in the US. The most memorable training that I still remember to this day is coaches would sometimes take away all our bow and all equipment, and we don't get to go to the gym or anything. And we just have to stand on the archery range looking down at a target 70 meters away, close our eyes, and just imagine shooting. And you do that for hours. And the weird part was, the first time I did, they were saying, Jin, you should give yourself a score for every arrow you shoot. I'm like, I don't have a bow, I don't have an arrow, and you want me to practice shooting and give myself a score. But the more you do it, the more you realize that, you know, on any given day, anyone who goes to the Olympics, anyone can shoot a 10. And at the time, I knew I could shoot a 10 every time I stand up to shoot a bow and arrow too. But I think what differentiates a gold medalist from anyone else is who can do it in that given moment at that time, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you think about it, shooting an arrow at the Olympics is no different than shooting an arrow in your backyard. Mm-hmm. It's the same arrow. Right. It's all in your head. And I think that's kind of what archery taught me is, you know, everything's in your head. And, you know, I think you can learn to not be rattled and hold on to your mental game. And I think that really became how I approach, you know, even what I do day to day, right? Even in sales, or even going into, as a college kid, taking an exam, right? Solving that math question or whatever problem on a practice test is no different than what you would do in a live testing situation, except you're more nervous than the other one because you know it matters. So, mm-hmm. you know, learning how to control that. And, you know, I think archery, this is a long way of saying archery really helped shape the mental aspect of how I live my life.
Is there a reason, like you mentioned, the coach at the time when you first started getting into archery had a Korean kind of background?
Yeah.
Archery in general, like archery and shooting, marksmanship,
yeah.
like Korean people are really, really good at that.
Korean people are really good. So most of the top archery countries, even though they're all foreign countries, I think many of them have Korean national head coaches.
And do you know, is there some reason for that? Is it just like people's interest in Korea with those types of sports is like more accentuated as compared to other sports? Is it have to do with like the military service background, if people get into like shooting guns, doing archery through that? Do you have any idea why there's so much like Korean people are so good at
I mean, sports? I like to think maybe, you know, Koreans just have a really good sharp mental focus, but I also wonder, I know Korea focuses a lot on winning medals at the Olympics, and I think as an example, like soccer, you know, you get one medal for men's and one medal for women's, mm-hmm. but archery is a very interesting sport where you can get 5 medals. You got the men's individual, men's team, women's individual, women's team, mm-hmm. and then a mixed team.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it influences countries to, you know, invest according to how many medals that you can win. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that kind of influences more people to be involved. So
yeah,
I kind of cautiously put that out there.
Now, the high school experience and your aspirations, like at the collegiate level, you went to MIT.
Yeah.
Was the expectation or the hope eventually to get to MIT, just given how deep you were and your like natural competency in the math and sciences?
Yeah, I mean, so as I've done archery, science and math was something that I really, really enjoyed. So, you know, I definitely did a lot of math competition growing up, all throughout middle school, high school, and, you know, physics. And, you know, I really liked those kind of sciences too. So I did go to a high school that specializes in math and science and did all their programs. Mm-hmm. And I think I was just at a very interesting crossroads where at the time, back in 2014, I could either go full-time with archery and try to prepare for the Rio Olympics in 2016, or go to MIT, right? And I think at the time I was at a crossroads, but I've had a couple of archery coaches who've been there and done that, and I think they helped me kind of narrow down the choice to archery is a very interesting sport where if you're D number 1, you can make a great living, but if you're not D number 1, it is a little harder. And also, you know, getting into MIT is such a privilege. Why would you kick that away? So I think that's where I also really wanted to, you know, go pursue, you know, my passion for not just engineering, but also healthcare at the time, because I think growing up close to so many, you know, I've always been interested in sciences, but I've also really kind of come to appreciate, you know, sports doctors and people who help sports teams, you know, athletes get back on track. And I think that also kind of piqued my interest in becoming a doctor. And so that's kind of where I realized, I want to go to MIT to try to figure out how I can not just do the sciences, but also, get into the medicine side of things and perhaps go into medical school so that I can help. At the time, it was medical devices that I was interested in, like prosthetics.
So the entrepreneurial path that you ended up taking, like in terms of that being one of the options on your list of career choices, like once you got to MIT and throughout that period, that wasn't even on the radar?
Not at all. Becoming a founder, doing anything entrepreneurial, no, it was anything but. My goal all throughout college was go to medical school. I did study computer science, but it was because I wanted to become a tech-savvy doctor. I had never imagined that I would go on to do my own company someday. So even my path outside of MIT was, after having gone to MIT, study computer science, and then I took a gap year before medical school to take the MCAT, applied to medical schools, and I happened to go back. I did a summer internship at a health tech company that builds data platforms for health systems and pharma companies. And they gave me a great opportunity to try sales. And of course, the company didn't know it at the time, but when I heard sales, I kind of thought, oh, that's an interesting thing to try to do before going on to medical school. So I did that, but I really enjoyed it because I found myself at an intersection of having learned how to build great technology as an engineer, and my passion for healthcare, having shadowed countless hours at hospitals and really wanting to become a doctor. And then now on the sales side, going to meet with executives from pharmaceutical companies and health systems opened my eyes to a lot of the technology problems in healthcare. It's not because of technical limitations, but rather there's so many convoluted workflows affecting how patients get care, or what physicians have to go through, or what pharma companies have to, all the regulatory hurdles that they go through to get a drug approved and successfully into hands of patients. And that I kind of felt like was where I felt I could really contribute with my technical background, my passion for healthcare, and now getting into how to work with people to implement changes. So that's kind of where I turned away from medical school, really wanted to learn more of that skill of sales and engineering to try to help hospitals and pharma companies introduce and adopt new technology. And so that's kind of where I turned away from medical school. I did sales. I did sales for a few years, and things get interesting here as well, because after doing sales for a few years, I just felt that there's so many ideas where I felt the company at the time could, do more to bring bigger impact for how healthcare is being delivered. And I just felt that at a big company, I was defined by who I was, by my job title. And my job title at the time was sales engineer. So I had to do everything only related to sales and engineering. And when I had new product ideas, it was, let the product team do it. So after hearing that countless times, I became a product manager to lead my own team of engineers to try to build products, healthcare analytics related products that I felt could be helpful. But as soon as I try to talk to enterprise users to try to figure out what do people really do on our product, or what are people really needing, and from time to time I would also pick up on engineering stories because I just wanted to build faster with the team. I got slapped on the wrist countless times because I was supposed to be a product manager, not talking to users like as if I were in sales or doing engineering. And so that's kind of where I realized maybe what I want to do, I can't do at this company. So doing a startup was still not on my mind. I had known that few of my friends were doing it, but it was never something that I would have imagined doing full time. And as I began to apply to different kind of jobs and different kind of, I applied to consulting, product management, just to try to develop more skill sets and really try to push myself harder. I just felt that working at a big company might probably come back to the same bullshit over and over again, where I would be defined by that job title and having to only do what the higher ups told me to do. So that I just couldn't make up my mind. And so that's when I decided to go back to MIT for a 1-year grad school. They have a master's program in engineering, but I went back not because I wanted to learn more engineering, but because MIT had a really good entrepreneurship program. And I had no idea what startup means or what entrepreneurship is. And I figured I'll just give myself some space to think about this and learn from MIT's entrepreneurship courses on what it's like. And I think that probably was a catalyst for me, because going to work every single day and then quitting my job and going back to grad school, of course you have classes, but not having constant work going on gave me that peace of mind to really think about, oh, what do I want to do? And being in the classroom again was a very welcome treat to really think about, okay, now I have a second chance at doing this school thing all over again. Let's make the most of it.
Right.
And I naturally gravitated towards classes that I wanted to take, which were, interestingly enough, geared around entrepreneurship. And even the engineering classes were very user-centric classes that were focused on building what users are, how users can best interact with your ideas. And I think that's kind of what really kind of got my eyes on building something that people want. And the one class that I really largely credit at MIT was 15390. MIT is a geeky school. Every courses are in numbers. 15 is a Sloan Business School. 390 was a new enterprises course that helps, that assigns you a team from day one, and you work on a startup idea throughout the entire semester. So I did that January of 22, and throughout that semester, it was focused on talk to users, go talk to people, go interview diverse, diverse market segments, and try to find patterns, and then let users' pain points come to you with an idea instead of you starting with technology searching for a problem. And I think the idea that we had worked on during that class is not what I'm working on today, but it at least gave me a framework on what it's like to start from ground zero, go talk to people. And I think it helped me break out my comfort zone. And so summer of 22 was when everyone goes off to do summer internships. I stayed behind on campus with a commitment to myself that, hey, you promised to do this startup thing, so let's give it a chance and see what it's like. And so I sat in my dorm room and just picked up the phone and started dialing and saying, hey, this is Jin. Do you have 10-15 minutes to tell me about your day or what you're doing at your job? And at first, I didn't really start with healthcare. I kind of started more broadly. At the time I did a food blog on the side, so maybe I was thinking maybe I should do something for restaurant owners, or maybe for something like food bloggers like myself. It was super easy to kind of rule that out. I just didn't have it in me to keep pushing with it. I naturally gravitated to healthcare, which is what I was passionate about. At the time I was preparing for medical school. And talking to one user led to another, because in healthcare, I see it as the 4 Ps, like payer, provider, pharma, and patient, and trying to talk to as many users as I can into all 4. When I talk to a physician about their day, and when I talk to a patient about, how are they going about navigating different treatment options, or asking insurance companies, how do you process payments or claims? I think I had a pretty good understanding of all the different problems, but I began to see an interesting pattern between how some patients with terminal illnesses didn't get any treatments that they were satisfied with, and they were having to resort to clinical trials. And I had previous pharma background, having worked on a couple clinical trial related projects, where they were also looking for patients who might qualify for some of their new drugs that they're developing, and they needed to work with doctors. So that's where I kind of realized everything was coming together, and I realized, oh, I have experience working in this field. I know some people that I might be able to hit up, and that's where I was able to kind of talk. As I talked with more and more users, that summer I ended up talking to over 150 people.
Wow.
I think I began to spiral into this thing called clinical trials, and trying to do something related to clinical trials at the time.
Wow. I want to do a time check, just because there's so many different directions that we can go, and I want to cover and make sure we have time to cover more on Miracle. We're doing okay on time. We'll have 20 to 25 minutes. Before I ask you more about Miracle, that summer experience, and kind of where you're at now, the MIT experience and your decision to leave the pre-med path, that happened when? Was that pretty far along into your MIT journey?
So throughout my MIT journey, I was always set on becoming a doctor, and I think I deviated from that path in my gap year before, so after graduating, and in the year that I was trying sales engineering at a health tech company, that was when I made the conscious decision that, hey, maybe not medical school, but I can still leverage technology to impact healthcare, but perhaps at a greater scale. So that's kind of when I made the conscious decision to withdraw and just focus on health tech.
Did your parents care about what you were doing when you were at MIT? Were they just pursue whatever path interests you most, or did they have any strong preference for you?
I mean, my parents were generally supportive. They've always been supportive of everything that I really wanted to do, as long as I tried hard on it. Though, at the time, I had finished MIT with all the pre-med requirements completed, with MCAT taken, and so I spent a lot of time preparing for that, right? Because even trying to go to med school, you have so many prereqs, but you have to spend so many summers and, even, just countless hours volunteering, shadowing, and everything like that too. So I think when I shared the news that I was, not going to medical school and just wanting to do this, they did share, it is a big change, right? Because that's something that, I've invested so much time and effort.
Right.
I think they just wanted to check that I was sure and, confident about the decision I was making. But overall, they've been very supportive.
And how would you describe the MIT experience overall? Mostly curious, if you're somebody and you have a number of very great options at the college level, right? So like any Ivy League school, MIT, maybe Stanford. Obviously, you only know because you have your own experience, and it's limited. But in terms of both the pros and cons from your perspective, in terms of what you really enjoyed being at MIT and areas, if any, that were maybe not as good, I'm curious what your overall experience was.
I think the biggest pro of my MIT experience was that everyone was passionate about engineering. Everyone was a builder at heart, and quite honestly, everyone was a geek and a nerd just like me. So I think I really found myself in a place where I felt like home. And what I also liked about MIT was, I don't know about other schools, of course, but having gone through both undergrad and grad school at MIT, but any time that came for exams or projects, I felt that everyone genuinely cared about helping one another out, right? It didn't feel like we were competing against each other. And I think there was a great community around, okay, let's help each other, let's do more, and let's get better together. I think definitely MIT, some of the times that were a little challenging and difficult was, when I did want to explore different paths at MIT, especially in freshman and sophomore years. It's an engineering school.
Right.
There's not much flexibility to deviate from that. And I think there was just a brief second where I kind of wondered, is engineering really what I wanted to be doing? Because I was already set on medical school. So I was thinking, maybe I should, study something non-engineering instead. Of course, there were still some flexibility to that with cross registrations with Harvard and stuff.
Right.
But I think you are in a bubble, and you are in a MIT engineering bubble, and I think that's kind of where there was a brief split second of asking myself, did I pick the right bubble to land in?
Now, when I was at Stanford, there was kind of a organization for international Korean backgrounds, people born and raised in Korea, and then they get into Stanford. There's also kind of more of a Korean American community as well. I interestingly wasn't part of either of those.
Interesting.
But the whole Cambridge being interested in these cross-cultural Korean heritage backgrounds, none of this came up until 2 to 3 years ago, right? Or even the last year of starting Cambridge. For you, as somebody who was born and I guess partially raised in Korea, and then spending some time in the States and then going to MIT, were you involved with Korean communities at MIT as well?
Yeah, so fun fact is I was the president of the Korean Students Association.
Okay.
But you're right, on campus there were definitely two groups, which one was a little more Korean American and one more Korean International Students Association, right, KISA.
Right.
I know the distinction is very clear for many campuses, but interestingly at MIT, the lines were very blurred. And I think it has to do with that there weren't that many Koreans. And MIT is a pretty small school, so every class has roughly 1,000. And I would say at least the Koreans that really came to really hang around together, I would say like maybe 10, less than 20 per grade. I could be wrong, but it kind of felt that way. And so a lot of my friends who are part of the Korean Students Association were also in the International Students Association. So, we definitely had a lot of overlaps and having fun together.
Yeah.
But I personally wanted to become and lead the Korean Students Association because I really wanted to, kind of like how you're building Cambridge. This was when like Gangnam Style was a big hit in 2012 and like Bulldog came about and like people and BTS, right? More and more people were taking interest in the Korean culture. And I wanted to use the Korean Students Association as a catalyst to help people get exposed to more of that. And so, some of the things I did when I was the president of KSA was doing like kimbap making challenge or bulldog challenge,
Cool.
so that we can, have a fun way of promoting what Korean culture is like on campus. And fast forward to today, it kind of ties to, some of the folks at Miracle who, one of them was at MIT, she got into the Korean culture because of BTS. And through that, she took classes at MIT related to Korean and participated in a lot of like the Korean related activities, whether it be through the Korean Students Association or other Korean related organizations on campus.
Right.
And to kind of now see her speak fluent Korean as a result of having immersed in the Korean culture.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
It is very cool. Yeah. It's also part of the reasons why like this whole Cambridge project is very interesting to me as well, is there's Korean diaspora and also these like international Korean profiles that are interesting. But then as a way for foreigners to engage with Korean culture in a way that is like approachable and digestible, is the like people within Cambridge are really prime candidates for that, right? Rather than them moving to Korea, not knowing anybody, not being able to maybe speak the language fluently, is Cambridge becomes really interesting. And then I think
becomes a bridge.
Yes, becomes the bridge. And also in the other way around, where it seems like there are some types of, even at the SF event that I hosted, some Korean founders who like literally moved to SF Bay Area very recently, right? And they naturally will position themselves around other Korean people that already are there, right? But it is important for them to interact with like foreigners as well. And there are foreigners that are interested in Korean culture, Cambridge, all that stuff. And so it being a bridge both directions, I think there's a lot of potential there. So it's cool to see you have already had that in your history at MIT. It was it what, 2014, 2015 when you graduated, or a little bit earlier than that?
Graduated from MIT.
From MIT?
It was actually 2018.
2018. Okay. And after that, the sales engineering role that you had previously described, you were literally doing sales, or you were just engineering certain like products for the sales team?
I did pre and post sales. I had a counterpart, an account executive that we tagged together, but we did everything from the very first sales meeting to closing the deal and also helping with the implementation. So everything pre and post sale.
And how much of the work that you were doing immediately post-grad is like similar in like industry or product development to what you're doing with Miracle?
I would say that everything that I learned back doing sales, you can't learn from a textbook. Going to get contracts from healthcare organizations like hospitals and pharma companies. Right. I had to learn by seeing how veterans do it, how well-seasoned sales folks do it. And I think that was the huge part of the first year. And now having done it for a few years at the job, when it came time for me to do it at my own company, I at least had a playbook of, what are people expecting on first meetings? What do contracts look like? How do you involve lawyers? How do you negotiate on terms? And after you close the deal, how do you provide ongoing support? And I think a lot of that definitely rubbed off on me from my previous company, because the company that I work for was a pretty big name in the health tech. And so seeing how they do it right, and then also, I think one of the biggest things I learned about sales is you don't sell, but rather you help. And I think that kind of mindset really helped me try to become someone who is not necessarily trying to sell you a pen, but rather try to help you figure out if you have a need and how are you are thinking about solving that need. And if what I'm trying to sell, what I'm selling happens to be something that helps,
Right.
great. If not, let's keep helping you try to find what you need. So I think that's like the mindset that I learned at sales that really helped me in my early days of building my company.
Now, the summer that you spent, this was immediately after the 1-year program that you partook in, this engineering master's kind of program at MIT, right?
Yeah.
How much confidence did you have in terms of like Miracle having potential and it materializing into a product that you could sell to various like institutions and companies? Was it did it come to fruition pretty like quickly? You said you interviewed something like 150 over 150 individuals. How many like ups and downs did it take for you to realize that like, okay, there's something here?
I think it took a lot longer. But my timeline was I went back to school in January of 22. And then summer vacation of that was when I did the 150 interviews. And then I did do another fall semester to finish with the master. So I finished the program in January 23. And I think when I had done 150 interviews was right around the time when the YC application was open. I think it was due September of 23. And at the time, I had zero product, zero users, zero anything. And I just had a bunch of insights from talking to over 150 users. I decided to apply to YC, just see what happens, use it as a learning experience. And fast forward to today, of course, I was very lucky to have gotten in. And I think that's kind of what kind of gave me the confidence to be like, maybe I am onto something. And I think as soon as I started the YC program, in January of 23, so I packed my bags in Boston and moved out to San Francisco, was when I started realizing, all the experiences that I've had before. I think I talked about this in the SF Cambridge event too. I really felt I was mediocre because I was a engineer by training, did prepare for med school at one point. I did sales, but it's not like I did like 20 years, right? I did a few years. And then I did product manager for a year. I was like mediocre at everything. But as I started to go try to, build something and sell this and make my idea come to life, I realized I knew enough pieces to go build the product that I wanted to, go sell it and get a contract and get the business working. And so I think during Y Combinator, I think was when I kind of realized that I can put my skills into use and really turn my idea to real life by acting on the ideas that I have gained from talking to users. And funny thing is, the idea that I applied to YC at the time was using LLMs to help streamline how researchers in the biotech space review papers and maybe even come up with new papers. This was before ChatGPT rolled out. So this is before ChatGPT was mainstream.
Wow.
But the more I talked to users, anytime I gave this early access to people were like, oh, this is cool. Let me try it. And they never use it. So that's when I got a hold of a few users and said, hey, I've built this. You're saying great things. How come nothing's coming out of it? They let me, they kind of shared some of their pain points with me, and none of it was related to paper reviews or drafting anything or nothing related to AI, but it was more related to where's my clinical trial today? How is everything progressing? And in order to do that, I need to go into like 3-4 different databases, pull the numbers together every time, and that was painful. That's kind of where I realized, you can just use APIs to programmatically fetch all the data into a single dashboard and have a real-time dashboard. And as I turned my idea to life was when I realized, maybe it's not the idea that's important, but trying to figure out what people's pressing needs are and give them what they need so that they can run clinical trials more efficiently was kind of where everything kind of came together. And as soon as I built something and people started using it, that's, I think, when I got my first conviction that, hey, maybe I can do this. And so I think everything really, I think getting into YC was kind of like the first moment when I realized, okay, after school, maybe I don't have to get a job. Maybe I can take a bet on myself for the 3 months of YC to give this a shot. And then if it doesn't work out, I can go back to industry. And then during YC, when I built something and people started using it and gave me a contract to use it, that's when I realized, okay, let's do this. Stop worrying about, or kind of like hedging my bets and trying to think about going back to industry. Let's just build this company full time and build what people want. And I think my mission has always been to try to make the most of my experiences to improve healthcare using technology. And that's the kind of compass that I've been building Miracle the past 2.5 years.
I want to make sure, because I'd like to ask you more questions about the YC experience, but we've got about 10 minutes, and I want to make sure we also cover a bit more about Miracle. So Miracle started, it's now been, what,
2.5 years.
2.5 years. And in terms of how you describe the product that you're selling and ultimately the like clients that you service, it's focused primarily on, I guess, like teams or corporations that are kind of working through clinical trials.
Right. Clinical stage biotech companies that are pushing their drugs through clinical trials so that they can get FDA approval.
And so for a novice like me who doesn't know too much, so I know just a little bit through doing like finance of like investing in these types of companies. But in terms of like what the product is and how a company would be utilizing your service. Like I know a lot of the analysis or the data management is just done in Excel. It's the same way in the finance industry as well. People have long wondered, like, how is it that Microsoft Excel since the 90s continues to be like the dominant platform
the
that
most
people are
formidable
using?
competitor for any startup.
Right. And why isn't there something more advanced or developed? In terms of like Miracle and how people engage with using Miracle, can you describe the service a little bit?
Yeah, I think the analogy that you use to the finance industry is very similar to what you see in the pharma industry too. I think one is Excel is a free tool. Anyone has it. Anyone can open it and use it. It's very easy. You don't have to, no rocket science to use it. The key insight that I had was a lot of the time in clinical trials, or let's take a step back. In terms of bringing science to life and turn it into a treatment that can help cure patients, they say it's average 10 to 12 years of drug development. That's a lot of time to bring science to life. And, it costs $2 billion on average. And I think a lot of that, there are a lot of inefficiencies related to forcing an industry of researchers and MDs and PhDs to use databases that they might not know exactly how to use, right? And they're not your Google level engineers who can, easily extract the data, work with APIs, right? And I think that's where, in order to have full visibility across a clinical trial, as an example, especially at smaller biotech companies that don't have the fancy tools that J&J and some of the big pharma have, they're logging into each of their clinical trial systems related to, whether it be labs or safety or, recruitment systems. They're logging into each system, downloading CSV exports, copy pasting it into an Excel spreadsheet so that they can see the full end-to-end funnel of, how our clinical trials going. Are we going to finish on time? And do we have enough money, since, biotechs are, VC backed as well. And that's where Miracle started by helping eliminate all that manual work by plugging and playing with APIs or programmatic exports so that we can create automated dashboard that saves a couple of hours of having to manually log in and pull the data together. And so some of our customers have said, we're saving over 20-30% of their time that used to be previously wasted doing that just to get visibility. And now they're able to react to issues that occur today as opposed to next week or later this week when someone has time to go compile the reports and provide updates, right? And so through that, some of our customers are saving 3-4 months on their clinical trial. And you might be thinking, 3-4 months, that's not a lot. But I think when 3-4 months began to compound and 3-4 months of a company's runway are now reinvested on ramping up new drugs or new pipelines, I think that's where I find a lot of meaning that we're helping biotech companies become more efficient so that they can bring drugs to patients faster, but also spin out new potential treatments that can help more patients.
And from a conceptual standpoint, in terms of like describing Miracle, is it more like actually a competitor or an alternative to Microsoft Excel, where people might not be using Excel at all? They're using they're inputting data directly to Miracle, or is it more like from a startup perspective, there are these applications that plug into maybe different Excel or payment types of infrastructure, and then it's just like a dashboard layover that provides summary on maybe different metrics like ARR or customer acquisition numbers, things like that. And it's simply a front layer that provides like visuals and maybe summary data, and they don't really touch the, I'd say, like back end where a lot of the information is being aggregated. Is it more like the latter?
Yeah, from the two, it's definitely the latter. We have no intention of competing with Microsoft on Excel. And I think Excel is a tool that's here to stay because, in addition to all of these databases, sometimes someone at a biotech company would just pick up the phone, talk to a doctor, get some updates and enter it into an Excel. That's a lot faster than having the doctor enter stuff manually, and it takes time for things to get entered into databases and then for you to get an update. So we coexist with spreadsheets so that biotech teams continue to use Excel, maybe not to the extent that they used to do before, but they still used to use Excel. And so we coexist and combine even the data that they're entering manually into Excel with all the other different data systems that they have.
And in terms of like competitors in this space to Miracle, I would think that obviously a product like this that is being offered to anybody that's running clinical trials, that this is something that would be very interesting. But are there other teams, organizations, companies that have tried to do something similar, or are there structural reasons why it's so difficult to execute on this?
So to be fair, there are other competitors, and I think the biggest category of what we can call as competitors is pharma tends to outsource many parts of their clinical trial to contract research organizations. You can think of them as consultants in a way. And when you outsource, they get back to you with updates and reports. And some of them also, claim to have automated dashboards that provide updates. I think the discrepancy comes from, if they're the ones reporting on their activities, right? Is that true or independent oversight of, what they're doing for the pharma companies? Whereas for us, we're working directly with the biotech companies, and we're pulling not just the information from their other vendors and CROs, but, we're acting as that pane of glass that shows them everything straight from the source data, and also in a way fact-checking and providing a layer of oversight of what each vendor is reporting, or all the different consultants are reporting as well.
Now you are in year 3, right? In terms of where Miracle is at today and like focus priorities, looking at the next, like, let's say 12 months, I imagine getting it from 0 to 1 in like the first year or two, and where it's at now is quite different. You have also a team under you as well, right? How big is Miracle in terms of employee size at this point?
For a long time, we were a team of 3. We recently added 2 more in the past few months, and we're actually actively hiring. So if you know any good engineers, we're really focused on scaling. We validated that what we are building is something that biotech companies need to run more efficient clinical trials, and we're focused on getting this out to more and more biotech customers. And I think the first couple of years we've been focused on the smaller biotechs, but now as we talk to medium-sized and even some larger pharmaceutical companies, being able to cater to their needs. And one of the big mission that I have, this goes beyond the next 12 months, is there's a lot of focus on AI these days, right? ChatGPT or not. And a lot of pharma companies, both small and large, are beginning to focus on, you have so much data. There's this thing called AI. What can we do to make our trials more efficient and get the most out of it? But my vision building Miracle is, yes, we want to help companies get insights. And in order to get insights, whether it be AI or not, you need to have all the data in a usable format. My take on the industry is, big pharma are spending 9, 10, 11 months just so that they can bring all the data together from all of their different databases into a single place so that you can run AI.
Right.
Because if you run AI on a data silo, is that really valuable? So I really envision Miracle becoming that critical data infrastructure where you can aggregate, normalize, and standardize all of your data into a single platform so that we can enable AI so that you can extract insights to help make your studies more efficient.
Mm-hmm. And much longer term in terms of like market potential and the flexibility of the product itself. So right now you are focused on like clinical trials and but more broadly, other healthcare types of like projects or priorities, it can generalize into that eventually.
Absolutely. I've always envisioned Miracle, our mission is to improve healthcare using technology. I intentionally didn't put anything about pharma or clinical trials specifically in the mission statement because we're starting with clinical trials.
Right.
But our goal is to really expand and really help contribute to the general, the bigger healthcare ecosystem.
And I guess in terms of what's most difficult or challenging is the willingness from some of these like clinical trials to adopt this technology from a learning curve standpoint. Like what have you seen? Or is it difficult for these? I assume like these institutions that have been around for a while and have gone through many clinical trials, they have a set protocols, right? So it's really, I guess, Miracle's job to make it as easy as possible to digest this. If it feels like with most established industries, this is oftentimes
It is a big challenge,
right?
Because people, especially people who have been doing this for a long time, right? Chief medical officer or VPs, they've been at their job for quite some time. So they've seen what works, what doesn't work. And we're not the first technology company to say that, hey, there's a better way to do this. So it's understandable that people are skeptical. And I think the way that we're building this and really trying to spread and scale faster is not by me telling them, but rather showing them, hey, we've worked with so-and-so biotech companies. We've helped deliver results and letting them see for themselves on how we've made the difference and really understanding. I think the key thing is understanding their studies and their nuances and, kind of me acting not like someone who's trying to sell you Miracle, but rather putting myself into their shoes, see what are they up against and, show them this is what best teams are doing today. Right. And it's not always about Miracle, but me coming off as someone who's confident and knowledgeable and someone who you can rely on to help solve your problems. I think that's been that's important as we continue to scale. Yep.
We're going to be closing on time here very shortly, but I'm obviously very interested in following along with Miracle and your journey, in part because like one of the things that in coming to Korea has been so wild to experience is just the difference in the healthcare system in the States as compared to Korea. Like the efficiency, the ease, the costs in Korea are so much more efficient. It's incredible. It's almost hard to believe. And one of the things that it just reminded me of is in terms of areas of disruption in the States, it seems like maybe education, healthcare, these are some really big areas that are quite ripe for disruption, but there are good reasons why it's very hard to execute. A lot of regulatory, data privacy, right? A lot of these frictions that exist, but for those few companies that are able to kind of crack the code and have some industry experience and know how to like implement some of these AI tools, there's a ton of opportunity. So it's very interesting for me to follow along with your journey as well.
Thanks so much for your interest. And again, thanks also for having me both at the SF event and here as well.
Of course. I think if in the future when I'm in SF or you're back in Seoul, whether it's related to being a founder, being in the healthcare industry, or even like your background in the sports area, there's I think many more collaboration opportunities. So I appreciate you being a speaker. It was one of the I think most well spoken of presentations at the event, and I'm so glad we were able to have this conversation as well. So thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks.